The hospice bed dominated what used to be our father's study. Its sterile metal frame jarring against the mahogany bookshelves and leather-bound volumes that had defined his scholarly life for decades. The antiseptic smell of medical equipment mingled with the fading scent of his favorite pipe tobacco, creating an atmosphere that felt suspended between past and present. I stood in the doorway that Tuesday morning, watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest beneath the pale blue blanket, when I heard my sister Carmen's voice drifting from the kitchen down the hall. The hardwood floors creaked under my feet as I moved closer to catch more of her conversation, my hand gripping the doorframe until my knuckles turned white. Through the kitchen window, I could see the ancient oak tree in our father's backyard, its leaves just beginning to turn the golden brown of early October. This house on Maple Street had been our childhood home, where Carmen and I had played hide-and-seek in these same hallways, where we'd shared secrets and dreams on the wraparound porch that now needed fresh paint. Elena keeps hovering, Carmen continued, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a whisper. She times her visits for when I'm not here, and then she tells Dad all these stories about her volunteer work at the library, trying to make herself sound more interesting. It's transparent, really. The morning light streaming through the lace curtains Dad's late wife Margaret had hung 15 years ago illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. Everything in this house held memories. The grandfather clock that chimed every hour, the Persian rug where we'd built pillow forts as children, the kitchen table where Dad had helped us with homework, and later, where he'd taught my son Michael to play chess during family visits. The sound of footsteps on the stairs was followed by Michael's appearance, his dark hair slightly mussed, wearing the old flannel shirt he kept here for house projects. At 35, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd learned to navigate family complexities with grace. "How's Grandpa this morning?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag and glancing toward the study where soft classical music played from the small CD player I'd brought weeks ago. "Sleeping peacefully," I replied, then lowered my voice. "But your aunt is in the kitchen spreading more of her stories." The floorboards in the kitchen creaked, signaling Carmen's movement, and I heard her wrapping up her phone conversation with promises to keep everyone updated about Dad's condition. Everyone, as if she were the designated family spokesperson, the official keeper of information and gatekeeper of access. "Mrs. Martinez?" a warm voice called from the front porch, followed by a gentle knock. Through the window, I could see Dorothy Chen, my 58-year-old friend and former colleague from my 30 years of teaching high school English. Dorothy had been my anchor during the chaos of Dad's illness, the person I could call at midnight when the weight of watching someone you love slip away became overwhelming. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in its usual practical ponytail, and she carried a covered dish that probably contained her famous lemon bars. "How are you holding up, Elena?" Dorothy asked, setting her dish on the hall table and studying my face with the attention of someone who'd learned to read beneath surface politeness. Before I could answer, Carmen appeared in the kitchen doorway, her perfectly styled auburn hair and carefully applied makeup creating a sharp contrast to my hastily pulled-back gray hair and yesterday's cardigan. Carmen had always been the prettier sister, the one who'd married well and maintained her figure, but lately, her beauty felt weaponized, part of the performance of being the more devoted daughter. "Actually," Dorothy replied evenly, "Elena seems to be managing things beautifully. Your father's care has been exemplary." Carmen's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, we're all doing our best. It's just that some of us have different approaches to showing love." Michael appeared at my shoulder, his presence solid and reassuring. He'd inherited not just his grandfather's intellectual curiosity, but also his ability to see through manipulation. "Aunt Carmen," he said politely. I think Grandpa might be waking up. He was asking for Elena earlier. It was a gentle lie, delivered with perfect timing. Dad had been sleeping deeply for the past hour, but Michael understood that I needed an escape from Carmen's psychological chess game. But what I discovered next? The trap finally sprang shut. Dad was indeed awake when I entered his room, but not in the way Michael had suggested. He was sitting up in bed, his eyes bright with an alertness I hadn't seen in weeks, and he was listening intently to something. As I got closer, I realized what had captured his attention. Carmen's voice carrying clearly from the hallway, every calculated word designed to reshape the narrative of our family dynamics. "Elena," Dad said quietly, patting the edge of his bed with a trembling hand. "Come sit." I settled beside him, watching his face as Carmen's voice continued to drift in. She was telling Dorothy about how I'd supposedly become possessive of Dad's care, how I'd made it difficult for her to spend quality time with him, how my jealousy of their relationship had created unnecessary tension during his final months. Dad's jaw tightened with each lie. Despite the cancer ravaging his body, despite the medications that sometimes clouded his thinking, his mind was crystal clear in this moment. He'd heard every word. "She's done this before," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but filled with a sadness that made my chest ache. "When you were children, when you got that scholarship to art school and she didn't, when you married David and she was still single, always rewriting history to make herself the victim of your success." "I should have said something sooner," he continued, struggling to keep his voice steady. "I thought she'd outgrow it. I thought protecting family peace was more important than protecting you from her lies." Michael appeared in the doorway, his young face troubled. "Grandpa, you should rest. And Elena, Dorothy's asking for you. She said she needs to clarify something with you before she leaves." Dad gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Go," he said. "But Elena, this time we're going to handle this differently. I won't have you carrying my regrets along with your grief." When I returned to the living room, I found Dorothy and Carmen in what appeared to be a pleasant conversation. But Dorothy's body language told a different story. Her shoulders were rigid, her smile too practiced, and she was using the tone I'd heard her employ with particularly difficult parents during school conferences. "There you are, Elena," Dorothy said, standing immediately. "I was just telling Carmen about my experience with end-of-life care when my mother was dying. It's fascinating how family dynamics can become so distorted during stressful times." Carmen's perfect composure flickered for just a moment. She'd clearly expected Dorothy to absorb her version of events without question, but Dorothy had spent 30 years teaching teenagers. She could spot manipulation from 3 counties away. "I was sharing with Dorothy how hard this has been on all of us," Carmen said, her voice taking on that wounded quality she'd perfected. "How we all process grief differently, and sometimes that creates misunderstandings." The compliment hit me harder than I expected. I'd been so focused on simply getting through each day, on managing medications and appointments, and the constant fear of making a wrong decision, that I hadn't stopped to consider whether I was doing it well. Carmen's smile became razor sharp. "Of course, we're all doing our part, though I sometimes worry that Elena takes on more than she should. Martyrdom isn't really helping anyone." But before I could respond, Michael stepped fully into the room, and I saw something in his expression that made my stomach drop. "Grandpa wants to talk to everyone," he announced quietly. "All 3 of you, together. He says there are some things that need to be said while he still has the strength to say them." Dad's bedroom had been transformed over the past weeks, into something that barely resembled the space where he'd slept for 20 years. The hospital bed dominated the room, surrounded by medical equipment that hummed and beeped softly. Pill organizers lined the nightstand alongside water bottles and tissues. The smell of antiseptic couldn't quite mask the underlying scent of illness that had settled into the very walls. But Dad's eyes were clear when we entered, clearer than they'd been in days. He was propped up against pillows, wearing the blue pajamas I'd bought him last month when his old ones became too big for his shrinking frame. His hands, once strong enough to lift me onto his shoulders, now looked fragile against the white sheets. "Sit down, all of you," he said, his voice carrying more authority than it had in weeks. "I've been listening to the sounds of this house, and I know there's been tension, fighting. I won't have my children at war while I'm dying, and I certainly won't have it continue after I'm gone." Carmen settled into the chair closest to his bed, immediately reaching for his hand. "Daddy, you don't need to worry about anything. We're all managing just fine." "No," Dad said firmly, and for a moment I heard echoes of the father who'd grounded me for coming home past curfew, who'd made me return the candy bar I'd stolen from the corner store when I was 7. "You're not managing fine, Carmen. And neither are you, Elena. Michael told me about the conversation in the kitchen yesterday, about the things being said." My face burned. I hadn't wanted Dad to know about any of this. The whole point of everything I'd been doing was to shield him from family drama, to let him focus on what mattered without worrying about us. "Michael shouldn't have bothered you with that," I said quietly. "It's nothing we can't handle." "It's not nothing when my daughter is being accused of jealousy for taking care of me." Dad's words were measured, but there was steel underneath them. "It's not nothing when lies are being spread about the person who's been by my side every single day for months." Carmen's grip on his hand tightened. "Daddy, I never said Elena was jealous. There have been misunderstandings, that's all. Grief makes us all say things we don't mean." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the medical equipment seemed to quiet, as if the machines themselves were holding their breath. Carmen's face had gone pale, her carefully composed expression finally cracking. "I was upset," she whispered. "I felt left out of important decisions. I didn't mean for you to hear that." "But you meant to say it," Dad replied. "And that's the problem." "Elena," Dad continued, turning his attention to me, "you've been carrying this family on your shoulders since the day I got sick. You've managed my medications, driven me to appointments, slept on that uncomfortable couch more nights than I can count. You've put your life on hold to take care of me, and you've done it without complaint." Tears blurred my vision. "You don't need to thank me, Dad. This is what family does." "Yes, it is what family does, but not everyone has done it, have they?" Michael, who'd been silent through this exchange, finally spoke up. "But instead of talking to Elena about how to help, you talked to other people about how she was wrong." "I know," Carmen whispered. "I know I did it wrong. I was hurt and scared, and I took it out on the person who least deserved it." "I'm going to die soon," he said simply, opening his eyes again. "Maybe in weeks, maybe in days. I don't know, but I know this. I won't leave this world with my daughters hating each other. I won't have my death be the thing that destroys this family." He turned to look directly at me, his gaze intense despite his weakened state. "Elena, your sister has handled this poorly, but she's not evil. She's scared, and she's grieving, and she doesn't know how to be the person this situation requires." Then he looked at Carmen. "And Carmen, your sister has been nothing short of heroic. She sacrificed her time, her energy, her peace of mind to make sure I'm comfortable and cared for. The least she deserves from you is gratitude, not sabotage." Carmen was crying openly now, her makeup streaking down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said, looking at me for the first time in weeks with something approaching sincerity. "Elena, I'm so sorry. You've been amazing, and I've been horrible to you." I wanted to accept her apology, to let this moment heal the rift between us, but months of hurt and exhaustion weren't so easily erased. "I needed you," I said quietly. "When this all started, I needed my sister, and instead, I got criticism and rumors and accusations." "I know," Carmen whispered. "I know, and I don't know how to fix it." Dad struggled to sit up straighter, and both Carmen and I instinctively moved to help him, our hands briefly touching as we adjusted his pillows. "You fix it by being honest with each other from now on," he said. "By remembering that you're sisters, and sisters don't abandon each other when things get hard." Michael cleared his throat softly. "There's something else, Grandpa. Something you should know before we talk about moving forward." We all turned to look at him, and I felt that familiar drop in my stomach that came with unexpected announcements. Michael's expression was serious, older than his years, and whatever he was about to say would change everything again. Dad's eyes sharpened despite his fatigue, and I could see him marshaling what energy he had left to focus on Michael. Carmen and I exchanged a worried glance, our conflict temporarily forgotten in the face of whatever revelation was coming. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked Michael, though part of me wasn't sure I could handle another emotional bombshell. Michael looked down at his hands, then back up at his grandfather. "I heard some of the things Aunt Carmen was saying to people, about Mom being jealous and controlling." He paused, swallowing hard. "But I also heard what people were saying back to her." Carmen went very still. "What do you mean?" "I mean, some of them weren't just listening, Aunt Carmen. They were agreeing with you, adding their own opinions about Mom. Mrs. Peterson from down the street said Mom was probably trying to keep people away so she could control Grandpa's will. And that friend of yours from work, she said maybe the family should intervene." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Intervene how?" Michael's voice was small but steady. "They were talking about calling Adult Protective Services, saying maybe Grandpa wasn't getting proper care, that maybe you were isolating him." "No," Carmen whispered. "No, that's not. I never meant for it to go that far. I was just venting. I was just upset. I was trying to process the implications of what Michael had shared. The idea that strangers were discussing my father's care, that government agencies might become involved in our private family tragedy, made me feel sick and exposed in a way I hadn't experienced before. "How do you know about these conversations?" I asked Michael, struggling to keep my voice level. "I was with Aunt Carmen when she ran into Mrs. Peterson at the grocery store last week. And I heard the phone call with her work friend when I was waiting in the car." He looked apologetically at Carmen. "I wasn't trying to spy, but people don't always notice kids are listening." "You didn't have to tell them directly," Dad said, and there was a steel in his voice I rarely heard anymore. "You gave them permission to think your daughter was mistreating me. You planted doubt about her character and her motives. Of course, some people were going to take that and run with it." I was pacing now, the small room feeling even more cramped as my anxiety spiked. "So now I'm not just dealing with family drama, I'm potentially dealing with investigations and official scrutiny during the worst period of our lives." "Mom," Michael said gently, "I don't think anyone has actually made any calls yet, but Mrs. Peterson did say she was keeping an eye on the situation." Carmen stood up abruptly, her hands shaking. I have to fix this. I have to call Mrs. Peterson and that friend from work and anyone else I talked to. I have to tell them I was wrong. Will they believe you? I asked, not unkindly, but with genuine concern. Or will they think Dad and I pressured you to change your story? Dad reached out toward both of us, his gesture weak but determined. Come here, he said. Both of you. Carmen and I moved closer to the bed, and he took one of each of our hands in his. His skin was paper-thin and cool, but his grip was surprisingly firm. We're going to handle this together, he said, looking between us. Carmen is going to make those calls, but Elena is going to be with her when she does. You're going to present a united front, show people that this family is solid, and that I'm being cared for exactly as I want to be. I wanted to protest that I wasn't ready to present a united front with Carmen, that trust wasn't rebuilt with a single conversation and an apology. But looking at my father's face, seeing the exhaustion but also the determination there, I knew this wasn't about what I was ready for. It was about what needed to happen. Okay, I said quietly. We'll handle it together. Carmen squeezed Dad's hand, tears still streaming down her face. I'm going to spend the rest of however long we have making this right. I promise. Michael, who had been watching this exchange with the serious expression that had become too familiar on his young face, suddenly straightened. There's something else, he said, and his tone made all three of us turn to look at him with renewed attention. What now? I asked, trying to keep the weariness out of my voice. Michael hesitated, glancing between me and Carmen as if calculating something. It's about the other reason Aunt Carmen was so upset about the time you spend here, Mom? The reason she didn't want to tell you directly. The silence in the room grew thick as we all stared at Michael. I felt my stomach clench, wondering what other complications could possibly exist in what was already such a difficult situation. Michael, honey, I said carefully. What are you talking about? He looked at Carmen, who had gone very still in her chair beside Dad's bed. Should I tell them, or do you want to? Carmen's face flushed red, and she looked down at her hands. I can't, she whispered. Dad's grip on both our hands tightened slightly. Whatever it is, we're going to deal with it. Michael, go ahead. Michael took a deep breath, seeming far too mature for his 14 years. Aunt Carmen has been worried that if Mom spends all her time here taking care of Grandpa, she's going to lose her job. And if she loses her job, then she won't be able to pay for college for me. She finally looked up, her face streaked with tears. You've been taking so much time off work, Elena. I know you've been using all your vacation days, and I heard you on the phone with your supervisor last week. You sounded so stressed, and I started thinking about what would happen if you got fired, and Michael's already a freshman, and college is so expensive, and... So you thought the solution was to convince me to spend less time with Dad? I couldn't keep the hurt out of my voice. I thought if other people started questioning whether you really needed to be here so much, maybe you'd find a better balance, Carmen said miserably. I thought I was protecting your future, protecting Michael's future. Dad was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, but firm. Carmen, I'm going to die, probably within the next few months. Elena knows this, and she's made the choice to prioritize these last months over other things. That's her decision to make. But what about after? Carmen asked, her voice breaking. What about when you're gone, and she's lost her job, and Michael can't go to college? What kind of sister would I be if I just let that happen? Mom, Michael said quietly. I heard your phone call with Mr. Henderson too. Are you really in trouble at work? I looked at my son, seeing the worry in his eyes, and realized I'd been shielding him from more than just the full reality of his grandfather's condition. It's complicated, honey. Yes, I've had to take a lot of time off, and yes, my supervisor has expressed some concerns, but I'm not about to get fired tomorrow. But it could happen, Carmen said. Elena, you know it could happen. And then what? Dad shifted in the bed, clearly gathering his energy to speak. Then we'll figure it out when it happens. Carmen, I understand you were trying to protect your sister and nephew, but you went about it in a way that created more problems, not fewer. I know, Carmen said. I see that now. I just felt so helpless watching everything happen, and I thought if I could just get people to encourage Elena to be more careful about work. You thought strangers' opinions would carry more weight than direct conversation with your sister, Dad observed. Why didn't you just talk to Elena about your concerns? Carmen was quiet for a long moment. Because I knew she'd tell me she had it under control, and I'd have to trust her. And I was scared she didn't really have it under control. The honesty of that statement cut deep, because Carmen wasn't entirely wrong. I had been telling myself I had everything under control, while my work situation got more precarious, and my savings dwindled from taking unpaid time off. Okay, I said slowly. I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that you were worried about Michael's future. But Carmen, what you did could have made everything so much worse. I know, she said again. Elena, I'm so sorry. I let my anxiety about the future make me sabotage the present. Michael looked between us. So what happens now? Do we need to worry about Mom's job? Do we need to worry about college? Dad squeezed our hands again. What happens now is that your mother and your aunt are going to work together to clean up this mess with the neighbors and anyone else who might be concerned. And then they're going to have honest conversations about balancing the time we have left with practical concerns about the future. But Dad, I started to protest. Elena, he said, cutting me off gently. I want you here. I want to spend as much time with you and Michael as possible. But I also don't want my death to destroy your life or Michael's opportunities. There has to be a middle ground. Carmen wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Maybe I could help more. Take some shifts here so you could go to work more regularly. I know I haven't been as present as I should have been. Why haven't you been? Michael asked, with the directness only teenagers could manage. You felt left out, Dad said with sudden understanding. And instead of asking to be included, you tried to limit Elena's involvement to make room for yourself. God, I'm such a mess, she said. I've made everything so much worse when all I wanted was to help. You can still help, I said, surprising myself. If you really want to be more involved, I could use the support. But Carmen, I need to know you're not going to go behind my back again. I need to know we can talk directly about concerns. Yes, she said immediately. Absolutely, I promise. Michael had been quiet, processing everything. Now he looked at all three of us. There's something else we need to talk about, he said. About what Aunt Carmen overheard when she was listening to Mom's work calls. My stomach dropped at Michael's words. The room felt smaller suddenly, the afternoon light streaming through Dad's bedroom window seeming too bright against the weight of whatever my son was about to reveal. Dad shifted in his hospital bed, the mechanical whir of the adjustable mattress filling the silence as he tried to sit up straighter. What do you mean, Michael? Michael looked directly at Carmen, his jaw set in that stubborn way that reminded me so much of his grandfather. You said you overheard Mom talking about money and work stuff. But what exactly did you hear? Because I've been listening too, and I don't think you got the whole picture. Carmen's face flushed red, and she pulled her cardigan tighter around herself, despite the warmth in the room. I heard Elena talking about taking more time off, about how the bills were piling up, about how she was worried about your college fund. What else? Michael pressed, and I could see him building up to something important. Michael, what are you getting at? I asked, though part of me was afraid to know. The weight of keeping everything together for months suddenly felt crushing. I sank deeper into the worn armchair beside Dad's bed, the same chair I'd been sleeping in more nights than not. The fabric was soft from years of use, but nothing could make this conversation comfortable. Elena? Dad's voice was quiet, but there was a concern there that made my chest tight. I looked around the room at the three people who meant everything to me. Dad's medications lined the nightstand in neat rows, a daily reminder of how much our world had changed. Carmen sat perched on the edge of the window seat, her hands twisted together. Michael stood near the door, looking older than his 17 years. The medical bills, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Even with insurance, they're enormous. And I have been taking unpaid time, more than I told any of you about. My boss has been understanding, but there's only so long I can keep missing work without consequences. Dad's face went pale. Elena, why didn't you tell me? Because you're fighting for your life, I said, emotion making my voice crack. Because you don't need the stress of worrying about money when you need all your energy to get better. Because that's what I'm here for. Carmen made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Oh my God, Elena. When I heard you talking about the bills, I thought you were just being dramatic, maybe exaggerating to get sympathy from your boss. I didn't realize. That's what I was trying to tell you, Michael said, his voice gentler now. Mom's been protecting all of us. She's been carrying everything alone. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of Dad's oxygen concentrator. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of a lawnmower. Normal life continuing while ours felt suspended in this bubble of crisis and love and fear. Dad reached for my hand with both of his, and I was struck again by how thin his fingers had become, how the wedding ring he'd worn for 25 years now slipped loose on his finger. Sweetheart, he said, I need you to promise me something. I need you to stop carrying this alone. Dad, I can handle it. I know you can, he said firmly. That's not the point. The point is, you shouldn't have to. Carmen stood up abruptly, moving to the foot of Dad's bed. Her face was streaked with tears, but there was a determination there I hadn't seen before. I have money saved, she said. Not a fortune, but enough to help with the medical bills, and I can take leave from my job. I have more vacation time built up than I know what to do with. Carmen, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, she said. I'm offering. No, I'm insisting. She looked at Dad, then at Michael, then back at me. Elena, I've watched you be the strong one our whole lives. When Dad got sick, I pulled back because I was scared and I felt useless. But seeing you shoulder all of this alone while I made everything harder by spreading gossip? She shook her head, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her cardigan. I need to make this right. Not just the gossip, but everything. Let me help carry some of this weight. Absolutely not, Dad and I said in unison, which would have been funny under different circumstances. Michael, Dad continued, your education is not negotiable. We'll figure out the money, but you are going to college. But if it's causing so much stress, then we find another way, I said firmly. Carmen, I appreciate the offer, I really do, but I need to think about it. Carmen nodded, but there was something in her expression that suggested she wasn't going to take no for an answer easily. Dad squeezed my hand again. Elena, there's something I need to tell you all. Something I've been putting off because I didn't want to make things more complicated. The seriousness in his tone made my blood run cold. Michael moved closer, and even Carmen seemed to hold her breath. What is it, Dad? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Dad looked at each of us in turn, his expression grave. Dr. Martinez called yesterday while you were all downstairs arguing. The latest test results came back, and we need to talk about what comes next. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of Dad's monitors. My chest tightened as I watched his face, searching for clues about what Dr. Martinez had told him. The way he'd said, "What comes next?" made my stomach drop. Dad, I said carefully, what kind of test results? He shifted in the bed, wincing slightly as he adjusted his position. Carmen moved closer, her earlier determination replaced by visible anxiety. Michael had gone very still, the way he always did when he was bracing for bad news. The scans show that the treatments aren't working as well as we'd hoped, Dad said quietly. The cancer has spread to 2 more lymph nodes, and there are some new spots on my liver. What does that mean, exactly, in terms of treatment options? Dad looked at me with that expression he'd worn when I was little, and he had to explain why we couldn't afford something I wanted. Patient, loving, but resigned. Without it, how long? Carmen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 2, maybe 3 months. Michael cleared his throat. What are the side effects of the aggressive treatment? Severe fatigue, nausea, possible kidney damage. I'd be in and out of the hospital a lot more. The quality of life during treatment would be... Dad paused, choosing his words carefully. Challenging. I found myself calculating again, but this time the numbers felt different. Hospital bills for aggressive treatment versus hospice care. Carmen's savings versus medical debt that could follow us for years. The practical part of my brain was still functioning, even as the emotional part was fracturing. When do you have to decide? I asked. Dr. Martinez wants an answer by Friday. That gives us 3 days to think it over. Carmen sank into the chair beside Dad's bed. What do you want to do, Dad? Not what's best for us. Not what costs less or more. What do you want? Dad was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. I want to see you two stop fighting. I want to know that Michael's going to be okay in college. I want to sit on the back porch and watch the birds at the feeder your mother put up 10 years ago. He looked up at us. I want whatever time I have left to matter, not just exist. The aggressive treatment would make those things harder, Michael said. It wasn't a question. Probably impossible, for months at a time. Carmen looked at me sharply. Elena, are you saying we should just give up? I'm saying we should listen to what Dad actually wants instead of deciding for him. The words came out harder than I intended, but I didn't take them back. We can't make this decision based on what we need. It has to be about what he needs. 6 to 8 months of him being sick and miserable, in and out of hospitals, unable to do any of the things that matter to him, I replied. Carmen, I've been managing his care for months now. I've seen what the current treatments are doing to him. More aggressive treatment means more suffering. Dad reached for both of our hands. Girls, this isn't a decision you need to make for me. But I need to know that whatever I choose, you'll support it. Both of you. Carmen was crying now, but she nodded. Of course, Dad. Whatever you want. Elena? I squeezed his hand. Whatever you decide, we'll make it work. But Dad, if you choose the palliative route, I need you to know that doesn't mean we're abandoning you. It means we're prioritizing your comfort and happiness over everything else. Michael moved to the other side of the bed. And it means we make every day count, right? No more fighting, no more drama. Just family. But even as I felt a sense of peace about the treatment decision, a new worry was taking shape. If Dad chose comfort care over aggressive treatment, we were looking at a very different timeline. 2 to 3 months to resolve everything between Carmen and me, to prepare Michael for college, to say everything that needed to be said. And I wasn't sure any of us were ready for how fast everything was about to change. Over the next few days, our house settled into a strange new rhythm. Dad had officially chosen comfort care, and the weight of that decision seemed to lift something from all of us, even as it brought its own gravity. Michael threw himself into researching colleges closer to home, though Dad kept insisting he shouldn't change his plans. Carmen had been unusually quiet, spending long hours at Dad's bedside when she thought no one was looking. I was in the kitchen making soup when Carmen found me, her face tight with something I couldn't quite read. "Elena, we need to talk," she said, closing the kitchen door behind her. "About what happens next." I set down my wooden spoon and turned to face her. "What do you mean?" "I mean the practical stuff. Dad's care, the house, Michael's college expenses." Carmen sat down at the kitchen table, her hands folded tightly in front of her. "I know you've been handling everything, but with this new timeline, you want to help more," I said, and it wasn't quite a question. "I want to move back home." The words hung in the air between us. I felt my chest tighten. "Carmen, that's not necessary. We have the hospice care team coming, and I've got a good routine established." 2 to 3 months, Elena. That's what we're looking at." Carmen's voice was steady, but I could see the emotion she was holding back. I can't live with myself knowing I missed this time because I was too proud or too scared to be here. I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. "What about your job? Your apartment?" "I can work remotely for a while. My lease is month to month." She paused. "I know you think I'm doing this out of guilt, and maybe part of it is, but mostly, I'm doing it because he's my father too, and I love him too." From the living room, we could hear Dad's voice mixing with Michael's, something about baseball statistics. The normalcy of it made my throat tight. "It's not about the guilt," I said finally. "I just don't want you to upend your whole life and then resent being here when things get harder." "Do you resent being here?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on practical matters, on managing everyone else's emotions, that I hadn't really examined my own feelings. "No," I said slowly. "I don't. But I also didn't have a choice. This just fell on me when Dad got sick." Carmen winced. "Elena, you could have asked me to come home sooner. You could have told me how bad things were getting." "Would you have come?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "Maybe not at first. Maybe I would have made excuses for a few weeks, but yes, eventually I would have come." I wanted to believe her, but months of handling everything alone had built up walls I wasn't sure how to tear down. "It's not just about being here physically, Carmen. It's about the daily stuff, the medications, the appointments, the insurance calls, helping him shower, watching him struggle to eat." "Then teach me." "Carmen, are you okay?" The honesty was startling. For so long, Carmen had seemed to float above the messy details of our situation, and seeing her this raw made something shift in my chest. "I'm scared," she continued. "I'm scared that if I'm here full time, I'll fall apart and make everything harder for him. I'm scared that you and I will fight and upset him. But mostly, I'm scared that if I don't come home now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I walked over and sat down across from her. If you move back, we need some ground rules. Dad's comfort comes first. Always. If we disagree about something, we discuss it away from him. And Michael doesn't get to be our mediator anymore. Carmen nodded quickly. Agreed. What else? The hospice team has routines, medication schedules, therapy visits, equipment. You can't just change things because you think there's a better way. I understand. I studied her face, looking for any sign of the defensiveness that usually flared up when we talked about practical matters. Instead, she just looked tired and sad and determined. There's one more thing, I said. You can't disappear when things get really hard. There are going to be bad days, scary days, days when he's in pain or confused or angry about what's happening to him. You can't just go back to your apartment when it gets too much. Carmen reached across the table and took my hand. Elena, I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. Watching Dad in the hospital, seeing how much you've been carrying, realizing how close we came to losing him before I really understood what was happening. I can't live with being the daughter who wasn't there. Before I could respond, Michael appeared in the doorway. Dad wants to know if you two are okay, he said, looking between us with cautious hope. He heard voices and got worried you were arguing again. Carmen and I looked at each other, and for the first time in months, I saw my sister instead of my adversary. We're not arguing, I said. We're figuring things out. Michael stepped fully into the kitchen. Good figuring out or complicated figuring out? Both, Carmen said. Michael, how would you feel about me moving back home for a while? Michael's face lit up, then immediately grew serious. Are you sure? I mean, that would be amazing, but are you and Elena going to be okay living in the same house? I looked at Carmen, then back at Michael. We're going to try. But Michael, this means things are going to change around here. Different routines, more people involved in Dad's care. Different how? Carmen leaned forward. More support for everyone. Elena won't have to handle everything alone. You won't have to worry about managing everyone's emotions, and Dad will have both his daughters here. The question hung heavy in the kitchen air. We'd all been thinking about it, but Michael was the first to say it out loud. We'll be here, Carmen said firmly. All of us. Together. Promise? I felt tears building behind my eyes. We promise, Michael. But even as I said the words, I knew that promising to be here was the easy part. The hard part would be figuring out how to actually do it without destroying each other in the process. Michael went back to tell Dad we were okay, and Carmen and I sat in the strange quiet that followed. The weight of our promises hung between us, and I could see she was thinking the same thing I was. Talking about being here together was one thing, but actually living it would be something else entirely. I should probably go pack some things, Carmen said, but she didn't get up from her chair. Carmen, before you do that, we need to talk about the practical stuff, the stuff that's going to make us want to kill each other if we don't figure it out now. You're right. I don't know how to do those things, but I can learn. Carmen was quiet for a long moment. I think I'm going to want to give up. And I think you're going to want me to give up because it's easier than teaching me. I was surprised by her honesty. Yeah, probably. So what do we do about that? Before I could answer, we heard Dad's voice from the living room calling for help. Carmen started to get up, but I put my hand on her arm. Let me get this one, but come with me. Watch how I handle it. We found Dad trying to get up from his chair, his face flushed with effort and frustration. The blanket had gotten tangled around his legs, and his water glass had fallen, spilling across the side table. "I can't even get up to clean up my own mess," he said, his voice tight with anger that I knew wasn't really about the water. I knelt beside his chair and started untangling the blanket. "You don't need to clean it up. That's what we're here for. I should be able to do this myself." Dad looked at her, some of the tension leaving his face. "You remember that? I remember you being patient with me even when I got mad at the shoelaces. Even when I said I could do it myself and clearly couldn't." I got the blanket free and helped Dad settle back into his chair properly. Something about watching Carmen clean up without being asked, seeing her talk to Dad about needing help without making him feel helpless, made me realize that maybe my way wasn't the only way that worked. Dad reached for Carmen's hand. "I'm glad you're here more now. I'm going to be here even more. I'm thinking about staying for a while, if that's okay with you." "More than okay." Dad looked between Carmen and me. "Are you two going to be all right with that arrangement?" "We're going to figure it out," I said. After we got Dad settled with his evening medications, Carmen and I went back to the kitchen to finish our conversation. But the dynamic had shifted. I'd watched her handle Dad's frustration with a gentleness I hadn't expected, and she'd watched me manage his physical needs without making him feel diminished. "You're good with him when he gets upset," I said. "You make all that medical stuff look easy. It's not, is it?" "No. It's terrifying most of the time. I'm always worried I'm going to hurt him, or miss something important, or make the wrong call about when to worry." Carmen sat back down across from me. "Elena, I need to tell you something. When I said people thought you were jealous, I think I was projecting. I think I was jealous." "Of what?" I stared at her. In all our fights over the past months, I'd never considered that her criticism might be coming from feeling left out rather than feeling judged. "Carmen, I never meant to shut you out of his care. I didn't think you wanted to be part of it. I didn't think I was capable of being part of it. There's a difference." We heard Michael's voice from the living room, reading aloud to Dad from the sports section. It was something he did every evening, and Dad always pretended to be more interested in the baseball scores than he actually was. "We're going to mess this up sometimes," I said. "Probably, but maybe messing up together is better than getting it perfect alone." Something loosened in my chest, a knot of resentment and exhaustion I'd been carrying for months. "When do you want to move your stuff over?" "Tomorrow, if that's okay. But Elena, I want to start helping tonight. Show me how to set up his evening routine." "Okay," I said. "But fair warning, he gets cranky when he's tired, and his medication routine is complicated." "I'm not going anywhere." As we headed back to the living room together, I found myself believing her. But I also knew that the real test wouldn't be tonight, when everyone was motivated and hopeful. It would be next week or next month, when the novelty wore off and we were all exhausted and scared, and running on nothing but stubbornness and love. The question was whether that would be enough. 3 weeks later, I was watching Carmen help Dad navigate his evening medications when I realized something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic. She wasn't just going through the motions anymore. She had developed her own rhythm with him, her own way of anticipating his needs. "The small white pill goes down easier with applesauce," she was telling him, already reaching for the jar before he could protest about the bitter taste. Dad looked at her with genuine appreciation. "You're getting too good at this, mija." "Elena taught me well," Carmen said, glancing at me with a small smile. The compliment caught me off guard. For so long, I had been the only one carrying the weight of Dad's care, and I had built my identity around being indispensable. Watching Carmen step into that role alongside me felt both relieving and unsettling. Michael appeared in the doorway, holding a cup of the herbal tea that had become part of Dad's nighttime routine. "How are we doing in here?" "Carmen's officially graduated from medication supervision," I said. She caught that interaction between the pain meds and the anti-nausea pills that I almost missed yesterday. Dad reached out and squeezed Carmen's hand. "Both my girls taking care of me." "I'm a lucky man." After we got Dad settled for the night, the three of us gathered in the kitchen. It had become our unofficial debriefing space, where we processed the day's challenges and planned for tomorrow's needs. "His appetite was better today," Michael observed, loading the dishwasher with Dad's specialized cups and utensils. "The physical therapist said his mobility is stabilizing too," Carmen added. "Not improving, but not declining as fast as we feared." "Carmen, can I ask you something?" I said. "That day when we fought, when you said people thought I was jealous of your relationship with Dad, what did you really mean?" Carmen paused in wiping down the counter. "Honestly, I think I was trying to make sense of why you seemed so angry all the time. I knew you were doing everything for him, and I knew I wasn't helping enough, but I didn't know how to bridge that gap." "I was angry," I admitted. "But not at you exactly. I was angry that I had to figure everything out alone. Angry that the responsibility felt so heavy. Angry that I was watching our father disappear a little more each day." Michael sat down at the kitchen table, his expression thoughtful. "Elena, you know what I noticed? You never asked for help. You never said you were overwhelmed. You just took on more and more until you were carrying everything. I didn't think anyone else could handle it. Or maybe you didn't want to admit that you couldn't handle it alone," Carmen said gently. "When Dad first got sick," I said slowly, "I thought if I could just be good enough at taking care of him, maybe I could control the outcome. Maybe I could keep him safe through sheer force of will and medical knowledge." "And now?" Michael asked. "Now, I'm learning that taking care of someone isn't about controlling their illness. It's about making sure they don't face it alone." Carmen nodded. "And that doesn't have to be one person's job." Over the following days, I watched our new dynamic unfold with a mixture of relief and adjustment anxiety. Carmen had moved into the guest room and established her own relationship with Dad's daily routines. She was naturally better at the emotional support aspects of his care, while I handled more of the medical management. Michael continued to be our logistical backbone, managing appointments and insurance calls and grocery runs. But the real test came on a Tuesday evening, when Dad had what the doctors called an episode. His pain spiked unexpectedly, and he became disoriented and frightened. In the past, these moments had fallen entirely on my shoulders. This time, Carmen was the one who noticed Dad's distress first. "Elena," she called from the living room, her voice calm but urgent. "I think we need to reassess his pain management." I found Dad gripping the arm of his chair, his breathing shallow and rapid. Carmen was kneeling beside him, one hand on his shoulder, speaking in low, soothing tones. "Dad, you're okay. We're here. Elena's going to check your medication timing, and I'm going to stay right here with you." While I reviewed his medication schedule and called the hospice nurse, Carmen guided Dad through breathing exercises. Michael appeared with a cool washcloth and the phone number for Dad's doctor. We moved around each other with surprising coordination, each of us contributing our strengths without stepping on each other's roles. 20 minutes later, Dad's pain was manageable again, and he was resting comfortably. The three of us regrouped in the kitchen, all of us shaky from the intensity of the experience. "That was really scary," Carmen said, her voice slightly unsteady. You handled it perfectly, I told her. I wouldn't have thought to start with breathing exercises. You kept him calm while I figured out the medical piece. We all handled it, Michael said. That's what made the difference. As I got ready for bed that night, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. The burden of Dad's care no longer rested solely on my shoulders, but more importantly, the relationship dynamics in our family had shifted in ways I was still discovering. Carmen knocked on my bedroom door. Elena, do you have a minute? She sat on the edge of my bed, looking younger than her 32 years. I wanted to thank you for teaching me how to take care of him, and for letting me be part of this, even when I didn't earn it. Carmen, taking care of Dad isn't something you have to earn. He's your father, too. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Carmen and Dad laughing together in the kitchen. She was helping him with breakfast, and he was telling her some story from his childhood that I had heard a dozen times, but never tired of hearing. Michael appeared beside me in the hallway, holding 2 cups of coffee. How are you feeling about all this? Your dad seems happier. I nodded, watching Carmen adjust Dad's pillows and settle beside him with her own breakfast. He always wanted both his daughters around. I think I was so focused on being the responsible one that I forgot he needed more than just medical care. And Carmen needed to find her own way to contribute. Exactly. I was trying to protect everyone, including her, from having to deal with the hard parts. But that meant I was also protecting them from being able to help. As the weeks continued, our family settled into a new rhythm. Dad's condition remained stable, which the doctor said was the best we could hope for. Carmen and I shared the daily care responsibilities, and she had proven to be intuitive about his emotional needs in ways that complemented my focus on his physical health. Michael continued to be our anchor, handling the practical aspects of caregiving that allowed Carmen and me to focus on Dad himself. But more than that, he provided perspective when we got too caught up in the intensity of the situation. One evening, after Dad had gone to bed early, the 3 of us were sitting on the back porch. It had become our ritual, a way to decompress and connect after challenging days. I've been thinking about what you said, Elena, about not being able to control the outcome of Dad's illness, Carmen said. I think that's what scared me the most about getting involved in his care. I was afraid that if I tried to help and he got worse anyway, it would somehow be my fault. But that's not how illness works, Michael said gently. Taking care of someone doesn't mean curing them. It means making sure they feel loved and supported whatever happens. I looked at my sister, who had become genuinely skilled at managing Dad's care, and at Michael, who had been quietly holding our family together through one of the hardest periods of our lives. I spent so many months feeling resentful that I was handling everything alone, I said. But the truth is, I was choosing to handle everything alone. I was so afraid of anyone else making mistakes that I didn't give them the chance to succeed. And I was so afraid of making mistakes that I didn't even try, Carmen added. So what do we do with that information? Michael asked. Carmen and I looked at each other. We keep showing up, she said. We keep figuring it out together. 6 months later, Dad's condition had progressed, but our family's ability to navigate his care had grown stronger. Carmen had become as competent as I was at managing his medical needs, and I had learned to step back and let her take the lead when she was better suited to handle a particular situation. More importantly, Dad was surrounded by people who loved him and who had found their own meaningful ways to contribute to his care. The burden that had once felt crushing when carried alone had become manageable when shared. If you're dealing with a family health crisis, remember that caregiving doesn't have to fall on one person's shoulders. Sometimes the people who seem least involved are actually waiting for permission to help. or they need guidance to find their own way to contribute, don't let pride or fear prevent you from building the support network your family needs. The most important thing I learned is that taking care of someone you love isn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about showing up consistently and being willing to figure it out together, even when everything feels uncertain. Колокол включили? Следующий выпуск уже на подходе.